decline in overall crime in the city of Wilmington. Gun violence continues to be a major challenge facing police. Following national trends, Wilmington's homicide rate has spiked over the past year 120%, with 12 homicides to date, compared to 5 last year. Today, we have City Council President Mr. Trippi Congo in his 4th term discussing gun violence with us here in the city and the initiative that the council is taking to help curb it. Mr. Congo, welcome.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. I mean, the city is facing a serious issue.
We are.
And last week you gave a great address.
Oh,
and
thank
would you like to speak to that a little bit to bring the members of the show?
Yeah,
that haven't seen
so
it?
those of us on council, we just wanted to make sure that the community knew that that we were aware of what's going on here in Wilmington.
Okay.
So it was actually, I have to give credit to where it's due, it was actually Councilwoman Xanthia Oliver's idea that we do a press conference. So we just got together, some of us on council got together, and just wanted to talk about it. And we wanted to help some organizations, some grassroots organizations who are addressing violence in their daily operations. So we gave out 10 micro grants of $4,500 to different organizations, just because we want to be a part of the solution on bringing some peace and calm to Wilmington. So it was my first time really doing a public address like that, and it went over really well, got some great feedback. But I think our community, well, I know our community is tired of just talking about it. Like it's really time that we take action on how we can curb this violence. I know it's a national trend that most major cities are experiencing an uptick in violence, but I just know that Wilmington is small enough and Delaware is small enough so that I think that we can fix our problem locally.
So what are some roadblocks, the hindrance? Because are we working with police?
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, understand that it's just a Wilmington issue.
Right.
It's not just a Wilmington issue,
Right.
It's throughout the state. But
Right.
what's the correspondence? Like, how is that going? Because I see them as a key player in this.
They are, but I don't think it's a police issue, honestly. A lot
Okay.
of times when we hear about gun violence and violence overall, we immediately look to the police to be able to fix it and correct it. But the police we can't police our way out of gun violence. There is no way that a police officer or a police department can change someone's mind who wants to hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That has to happen. The police are a major part of it, but they're not the main ingredient. I think it's community-based. I think it's public education-based. It's
Mm-hmm.
family-based. But the police can't change somebody's mind. Like if you wanted to hurt me, the police aren't going to be able to say, Kerwin, don't hurt Trippi.
Mm-hmm.
Like that has to come from your circle of friends, from your family, from your neighborhood. That has to come from you. Like you have to be able to decide, like I'm not going to make gun violence, and a solution for whatever we may have going on.
And that's the reason
Right.
for the grassroots.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Because they can address those children. They can make sure those children know how to solve problems besides fighting. And well, I think we're always going to fight,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have to take it to the level of shooting somebody.
Mm-hmm. Legislatively,
Mm-hmm.
what can we do? So from a state side,
Right.
from a federal side, a city side, what can we do legislatively to help curb this gun violence?
I think a major problem, and people don't really want to talk about it because it's not popular and it's just not a popular
Well,
thing
welcome
to talk
to the
about.
agenda. We're
Right,
into
right.
not popular.
It's a lot of these guys who are doing the shootings have been locked up repeatedly with gun charges.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them 4 and 5 and more times than that. So we have to make sure that our judges, that our attorney general, that they are keeping violent people off of the streets.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's easy to say. I think we have to be lenient when it's time to be lenient. But if someone has multiple gun charges, I consider them dangerous, and they don't need to be on the street. They need to be in prison, being rehabilitated, so they can eventually come back on the street. But you just can't keep letting them return to the streets the same day they get caught with a gun, or giving them bail that they can come up with in a matter of hours, and they're back right on the streets getting locked up again a week later with a gun. So I think legislatively, we have to make sure that we're holding our judges accountable, that we're holding our attorney general accountable, to make sure that they're not giving dangerous criminals, a free pass. But when it's applicable, when somebody, I think we have to do it on an individual case.
Mm-hmm.
If the circumstances are such that the person doesn't have a violent history, they don't have a criminal history, and they were caught with a gun for whatever reason, maybe give them a break, but not the same guys that we've arrested a couple of months earlier with guns. That's just not acceptable anymore. So I think legislatively, we have to, that's one of the solutions, because there's only a small group of individuals who are committing these crimes and going around shooting each other. So we have to make sure that we are addressing them directly. Council-wise, I'm not sure what council can do legislatively, because that's not really in our jurisdiction. I think that we have to be a voice for our communities who may want to see changes around police reform, or may want, just like I'm doing right now, the communities may want to be able to talk directly to the judges or talk directly to the Attorney General. I think that's our responsibility, because we're supposed to have those relationships with other elected officials so that we can have those difficult conversations. I don't think that we have done that. We haven't lived up to our responsibility.
So what's the roadblock in that? I mean, you and I are here, and easy enough, we're having a conversation. It sounds as though you've isolated the issues. You know where the problems lie, for the most part. I mean, you don't know them all. Yeah. So it seems like if you had those, I guess, decision makers, stakeholders in a room and say, this is what we need to do, what's stopping that from happening?
Politics, honestly. Friendships, relationships, people. I think the majority of people get into politics for the right reason. But then we become friends and associates, and we don't want to offend each other. We don't want to call each other out, and I think that gets in the way of us doing what we're supposed to do, almost on a daily basis. So if I'm I'm the president of Wilmington City Council, do I really want to call out the mayor? Do I really want to call out my other council members? Do I want to call out the governor? Do I want them calling me out? Right. And I think that gets in the way, and we have to come. I think we're at a point now where we can no longer allow our relationships to be a hindrance to solving, what's going on here in Wilmington.
So have you experienced any roadblocks other than not having the conversation is of course a roadblock, but are there some things that you could do without legislatively?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just the politics. We have to be able to take the politics out of what we do and just do what's right. I think the community is looking for us to be leaders. At the same time, I think that elected officials need to make sure that the community knows that they're the leaders, and we're supposed to be their voice. We're supposed to follow behind what they ask us to do, what they voted us into office for. So I think that a lot of times the community elected me to be president, and I think after the election, I think they kind of sit back and just wait for me to work my magic, and wait for elected officials to work our magic. That's not really how it happens. The community has to stay engaged, and they have to continue to hold us accountable. So I think the biggest roadblock, I think, is just apathy. People, once someone is shot, everybody's up in arms, but then the next day, it's kind of business as usual. Life goes on. Right. We have to realize that we can't keep on waiting for the emergency to happen for us to continue that path towards what we need to do, whether it's legislatively, whether it's community-based, whether it's around the police department. We have to be able to, hold steadfast in whatever our missions are. So it's really, we're still used to violence. That we hear about it, we read about it, we talk about it, but then the next day, we're like, what are we doing about it? And I just think that we're at a point now where we have to begin to do something about it. Like, it's good to have the conversation, but we're not talking about anything new. Right. Like, whatever we talk about today, people have already talked about this yesterday and decades past. So we really I think we're at a point, and I think the community is at a point where we really have to take some action.
Some solutions need to happen.
Right. So, and it can't be incremental. Right. Like, we have to do something major.
I agree.
Like, we can't be, okay, we solved this one problem, but we have 100 more problems to solve. We have to do something so massive and so community-based that it just takes Wilmington by storm.
So we've had conversations about this in the past, and you've mentioned that education is at the first and foremost importance when it comes to dealing with this issue, among other issues in Wilmington. So what are some of your ideas, and how does it correlate to the overall gun violence
in the city? These are not my ideas. There have been so many people who have talked about this, whether they were in politics or not, just how we need to make sure that our school system is properly funded, how we need to make sure that our teachers are properly paid. We have to make sure there are enough black males who teach. We have to make sure that the resources are there so that the families can be a part of the child's education also. And until we do that, I don't see us being able to really fix some of the issues, because I just think that education is the great equalizer. And until we put enough pressure on our delegates in Dover and our governor to make sure that public education is a priority and that it's properly funded, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. I think honestly, I think that we have to even take it to the point where we're making sure that our daycares are providing a foundation so that once children matriculate to first grade and kindergarten and preschool, that they're ready. Because we already know that once some children, like a lot of African American males, children overall, once they're in first grade, they're already behind. That they start off behind the 8 ball. So if we're concentrating on high schools and 7th and 8th graders, that's not where it is. We have to. I think that we have to make sure that our daycares are almost, what's the word I'm looking for? That they're almost like governed to make sure that their children are coming out ready and prepared. Okay. If we wait until they're in 2nd and 3rd grade, it's already too late because they're constantly trying to catch up. I just think that until we do that there are no quick solutions. It's going to be, we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But I do think that through education, we can start to see some serious changes in our city.
So, I do not have the statistic, and I apologize, but from doing the investigations that you have and working with the police department, how many of these murders are committed where youngsters or people that are still school age, whether that's high school?
Yeah, most of them.
Most of them,
yeah,
right?
most of them. You know, working in the funeral home, like I see it.
Yeah.
I see it firsthand, and it's such a tragedy because I see the same children going to funerals. I can't imagine when we were growing up going to. There's a guy that works with us. He said he's been to at least 30 funerals, and he's 21 years old, and all of them were his age or younger. I can't imagine like the mental trauma that he has gone through, just going to funeral after funeral. And it's just, and the older, and it's a shame because right now, because of the legal system, like the older guys, the adults, 18 and up, they are coercing the younger children to do the shootings and to hold the guns because they know they're not going to do a lot of time. Right. They're going to go to fairs, they'll be out in a month. It's
almost like a business decision.
Right. So they say you do this for us because if you get caught, you'll be right back home, and it's happening. So that's why we have to make sure that we're holding our judges and our attorneys accountable because again, this isn't something that I just thought of. This is information that was shared with me, so it's not a new conversation. It's just a conversation that we have to be able to take action on.
I mean, so many people at home might be asking this question, so I'm going to ask it for them.
Okay.
If we know who these folks are, or we have a pretty good idea, why can't we just go and lock them up?
Good question.
Isn't there some task force? Is there some, police response? Is there something that can be done?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I know that there's mistrust between the police department and the community. So I think that if we want to give police officers their free rein just to lock up whoever they think might be causing the issues, like do we really trust them to deal with our young black males? So we have to be careful when we say that.
Yeah,
I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that's a concern of a lot of people. And I think I've even touched on it, but we have to be careful because we don't want anyone taken advantage of. Right. We don't want to assume, like how sure are the police? How sure will they be before they arrest somebody? Or are they going on a hunch? So there's so much mistrust. We have to be careful how we just kind of give them free
dealing
rein.
with the mistrust. Thank you for bringing that up. And I don't expect the police to be able to prevent the homicides. I'm looking at a relationship with the police for folks feeling comfortable enough to come in and report the homicides, right? This person did this person did that. How do you visualize that trust being rebuilt in the city?
That's probably not going to happen, honestly. Because
really?
Yeah, I don't see that being a reality because there's too much fear. Like, we can't ask someone who lives on the block who saw someone shoot somebody else to go and report that person when they know their friends are just as willing to shoot them for telling on their friend. I was talking to my chief of staff and another person who works with us on council, talking about just that. Like, how do we make it rewarding enough so that people will start to
and is that reward just trust, or does it have to be an actual reward?
It has to be a reward. It has to be right now, because he told me like the Crime Stoppers give $1,000. Nobody is going to tell on somebody else for $1,000. Now, if we're serious about it, that's up the ante to $25,000 or $50,000. To curb some of these I guess to encourage some people to come forward
Mhm.
with information, but nobody's going to do that for $1,000.
Right.
And especially just knowing the mentality of some of the young guys out there and young ladies out there too,
Mhm.
who have no problem with shooting someone, I think, that might and try to incriminate one of their friends.
Right.
So $1,000 isn't going to work.
Right.
Are there people willing to cooperate and to have that relationship with police officers? Absolutely. But I think the reward has to be much greater, and the trust has to be there.
Mhm.
And we do that through community policing, like real community policing.
So community policing, when I remember, it was literally out of the car, doing what was necessary to get
Right.
things done. It was knowing your neighbor, knowing who's in the community doing these things, and I don't know. I just don't see that anymore.
No, we don't. And what we have a problem with is the police department base community policing on what they think it should be.
Mhm.
We have to base it on what the community wants.
Mhm.
So we might have different sections of the other department who go out and walk the beat, but that's not good enough. That's not what the community wants. And you mainly see it downtown in the business districts. You don't really see that a lot
In the community.
in the neighborhoods.
Right.
And there's always the excuse that
Is it funding?
no, it's not funding. It's just the desire. It's not funding. It's just the want and the willingness to make it happen.
Do they have the manpower to do that?
Absolutely. We have Wilmington has over 300 police officers. We have one of the largest police departments per capita in the country.
Wow, I did not
So
know that.
Yeah, we do. We have the manpower. I don't think that we have the determination to make it happen, make it a reality, because of just people getting caught up in doing what they've always done, and the community not being vocal enough about it. Like we've been talking about this on council since I've been on there.
I can only
Yeah,
imagine.
This is my 13th year on council. We've been talking about community policing since I've been there, but the community has never seen it to the extent like when we were growing up.
Mhm.
You actually saw officers, walking in our neighborhoods.
And you knew their name, and they knew your name.
Right, but it's not the same. I think that's something that the mayor has to make a priority, and that the chief of police has to make a priority. So he'll say that the whole department, they have a community police department, but it's not a reality.
Mhm.
It's not, and we don't see it. And if we did see it, the community would let us know, and we wouldn't still be talking about it on council, and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. We could be talking about things like what's going to happen this summer. So
Right.
as the temperature increases,
Mm-hmm.
now that COVID is beginning to get behind us, not completely behind us,
Right.
more people are going to be out. There's going to be more socialization. Is the fear that the homicide rate will increase even more?
It will. Yeah, I have no doubt that it will, unfortunately. Just because it used to be about drugs.
Mhm.
Only time somebody really got shot is if it were over some beef around drugs.
Mhm.
But now it's just a way that our younger generation handles their differences.
Mhm.
It has nothing. I'm not gonna say it doesn't have anything to do with drugs, but it has very little to do with drugs anymore. If you and I have a difference, it's
More
very
street
common,
justice
right.
than anything else.
It's a reality that one of us will probably shoot each other based on that's how we settled it. And I'm scared that you're gonna have a gun. You're scared that I have a gun, so I'm gonna shoot you first.
Mm.
And it's so emotional right now. As much as we love each other, if somebody did something to you, I'm gonna want revenge,
Mhm.
right? And we're grown and we're adults and we have everything to lose.
Mhm.
So if something happens to two teenage guys who have nothing to lose, they dropped out of high school, they don't have that family support, that family infrastructure, what is stopping them from doing what we would do?
Right.
So how can we place so much pressure, or so much we have our expectancies of these young guys who are in the streets just to stop shooting each other? It's not going to happen because
Right.
it's emotional. Like their friend was just shot, so naturally they're going to go try to get revenge, and it just keeps happening.
There's more of an incentive for them to retaliate than there is for them not to
Right,
retaliate.
and like they're thinking, what do they have to lose?
Right.
Like they have, and we have we have everything to lose. I have my business, my family. You have the same,
Mhm.
and we would even want revenge.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't we think that these young guys would want it?
Right.
So we have to, but we wouldn't do it because of what's been instilled in us.
And we believe that And I agree with your point.
Right.
But we believe that programs can fix this.
I think everything. We need whatever it takes. We got to throw in the whole kitchen sink.
And you know where I'm
Program.
going with this. I know it just seems to me, Councilman, that we're always throwing a program at something.
Right. And
Is there something else that can be done?
Education.
Education.
Right. Because not every child is going to go through that program, but
Right.
every child, at least initially, is going to go through a public school system. So those programs, those ideas, those resources have to be in our school system. And it sounds good to build a community center, and that's a good idea. That's a great idea because children do.
It's not a waste.
Right. Not at all. Children do need an outlet, but every child is not going to go to that community center. But every child will get up and go to school. So if they can learn in school, but they would learn in that community center, there we go. I just don't think there's a will. I don't think that will ever be there, honestly, from any of our elected officials until our community stands together and demands it.
So what has clergy, I know you've had clergy with you during your speech last week. What role are they playing in this?
A huge role. The clergy has always been the catalyst for change in our culture. If you take it back to the 60s, they were responsible for bringing about the
end of the riots.
Right, the riots, and just doing everything on a fair and equal basis. When we couldn't vote, the clergy, when we couldn't ride, the buses, the clergy they were the catalyst. So the clergy I think the clergy has the biggest role in changing Wilmington, because Wilmington is so small. Everybody knows each other.
8 miles.
Right. Everybody knows each other, and they have the attention of thousands of people at least one day a week. So just imagine if every Sunday, clergy got together and they said, this is going to be our message. We're going to talk about, what we normally talk about as far as religion, but we're also going to throw in how it's important to love your neighbor, and how it's important to open up a bank account, and how it's important to how important education is, and how it's important to buy local and buy black, and just kind of give us those nuggets of information every Sunday, and say, you know what, if Trippi isn't acting right as city council president, if the mayor isn't acting right, if the chief isn't acting right, if the governor isn't responding to what we're saying, now we're going to take these thousands of people and we're going to protest and we're going to boycott like they did in the 60s. That's the only way anything ever got done in our community. It was through protests and through boycotting. Not saying violent protests. They can be peaceful, but we have to be able to get the attention of the powers that be, because again, it's always been a conversation, and at the end of the conversation, it's business as usual, and they know that, and I think they take advantage of that because they know that we haven't been able to unify as a community, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, poor, wealthy, business owners who come here. They all have a stake in it, and until we're able to be one voice, I don't see where we can really make any change, unfortunately.
How about community development? Because a lot of this is, they're in situations where their community is just not developed. They don't. There's not a lot of opportunities. They're living in food deserts. Their homes are dilapidated, so on and so forth. Is there any ideas or any plans on what we could do with that?
Yeah, that's really important. People want to be proud of where they live and the neighborhoods they live on, the blocks that the houses they live in. So that's really important. But I've always been, if we fix up a community and we make their houses beautiful, and everybody has a garden and the blocks are all paved.
Problems remain the same.
Right. Are the people that live inside, are we developing them?
Right.
So my thing is really, how do we develop the people? And the people will naturally, instinctively develop their neighborhoods. So it sounds good to say we're going to go ahead and put millions of dollars in facade improvement. But what is that doing how is that helping that person who lives in that house, who doesn't have a job, who doesn't have a father figure, whose parents may be on drugs? Like, I don't see how that helps it. And I don't want to minimize the importance of beautiful neighborhoods, because I think that is really important. But I just don't see how that helps that child or that family who still feels lost living in a beautiful house. So if we took a family from the inner city who they don't have an education and they don't know the difference between right and wrong, and they're selling drugs, and we put them in Middletown, what's going to happen? Like Middletown is going to start to slowly experience
Mm-hmm.
what Wilmington is experiencing. That's what's happened. Like now the county, like what has always happened in Wilmington has spread out through the county, to Newark, to Middletown, because those same families have been displaced to those areas,
Mm-hmm.
and they still have that same mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as much as where they live, but it's how they live. So that's what we really have to focus on, I think.
You're right.
All right.
I'm hopeful, Councilman, but I'm also like, I hear this defeat in these plans that we're doing. Like I don't have I don't feel that there's a path.
There's not.
Yeah.
There's not a path. My humble opinion, the only path is it has to be something massive.
Something massive.
Like back in the 60s when we were united and the churches were the catalyst, and there were just hundreds of thousands of people demanding justice and demanding that things be changed. If that doesn't happen, you're right. You're absolutely right. Everything those grants that we gave, those programs, the anti-violence initiatives that we want the mayor to to start to incorporate in our city, it's all for nothing. I just don't see where we can't continue to work in little individual silos. Like all those programs have to be one program. They have to have one voice, and they have to be able to demand change. And until that happens, we'll be right back next year having the same conversation.
Who can viewers contact to get that plan information or get their young person into some of these programs that are going on?
They can call us. They can call us at City Council at 576-2140. It's 302-576-2140. And again, I don't want to minimize what thousands, hundreds, at least dozens of grassroots organizations are doing. I don't want to do that because they are doing some great things. They have helped a numerous amount of children. So I don't want to minimize that, but we're still where we are.
Right.
So we really have to be able to take it up to another level. So there are some great organizations out there who have redirected some children's paths, and I appreciate that. But that needs to happen by a million. Like how do we duplicate that to a citywide effort where we're not continuing to have the same conversation? And that's my frustration, that we continue to have the same conversation. And in another 4 years, I don't want to still have the same conversation as me as like a community leader. Like I don't want to still be having the same conversation.
Right.
I want to be able to at least lay a foundation so that when I'm no longer a politician, I can say, and people can say that, it was a job well done. Not only me, but everybody.
The entire council.
Yeah, the entire council, the mayor, all of us as elected officials. I don't want us to walk away in 4 years, if we're reelected or not, and say that they didn't do anything to make some serious change.
Well, you guys are definitely putting your best foot forward. We look forward to the agenda that you have and how that affects everybody in the community. And again, this just isn't a Wilmington problem. It's up everywhere.
Right.
Even though crime is down, as you're saying, the street justice is up, and people are killing one another. And unfortunately, it's really struck home in Wilmington.
It has, and we can't. I don't think it's fair for us to compare ourselves to other cities across the country.
Our problem is our problem.
Right, our problem is our problem, and I think that we're small enough to be able to fix it if we understand the urgency of now.
Right.
Right.
And getting that across to people.
Right.
Well, we want to thank you so much for coming out today and breaking it down for some folks that may not have known.
Right.
You've shown where this stands on the agenda, and it's at the top of it.
Definitely.
So again, thank you.
All right, thank you,
appreciate it,
man. I appreciate everything you did, man.
Thank you very much.
All right.
We look forward to seeing you next week on the agenda.